Apex itself then is just a PL/SQL web application. The procedures generate pages of HTML for display in browsers. We invoke the procedures through the web listener, through the get or post method. I was demonstrating a very simple get at that point. HTTP is the protocol between browser and web listener, which does cause issues with maintaining sessions because HTTP is a stateless protocol and each contact from browser to the web listener is, as far as the web listener is concerned, a brand new contact. It has no memory, but Apex has techniques for maintaining or simulating state, even though HTTP itself is stateless. Having reached the web listener will forward the request onto the database over SQLnet or OracleNet, to give it the correct term. And then within the database server, we execute the F procedure with whatever parameters were passed through on the URL. Now, how do we generate that page of HTML that gets sent back to the browser? Several techniques, but you can do it the hard way. I'm going to do it the hard way just to demonstrate it, just to demonstrate what's going on. And that's with the packages HTTP and HTF. There are more packages, OAutil, OAcookie, many, many more. These packages do make development much easier than if you were designing HTML pages yourself, character by character. These packages will do a lot of the work for you. So how does it work? Well, what I'm going to do is proceed to a Unix system, which I happen to have got here. And first off, we need a web listener. We need a web listener where we can't use Apex at all. So lsnrctl status. Do I have anything listening? My database listener is monitoring port 1521, and that's it. There's no HTTP listening going on here. So, first thing I need to do is enable a listener for HTTP. SQL+/sysdba, and run a couple of packages that will enable listening. Now, we have a package called dbmsxdb. Describe it if you wish. Describe dbmsxdb. And among other things, this gives us the ability to configure listeners for FTP and HTTP. I'm not interested in FTP at the moment, but I will enable an FTP port. Which port? 8008. I just picked that at random. Now, once that call completes, if I return to my database listener, what do we see? We see that I do now have a listener 8008 is now listening for HTTP. So I've set up a very basic HTTP listener. This, by the way, when we move on, is effectively the embedded PL/SQL gateway that I'm using at this point, which we'll talk about in greater detail a bit later on. So I've enabled HTTP listening. Then I need to create the virtual path, because remember, when you issue a URL, you have to set up this thing. In this case, it was PLSOTN. We have to create that as a path that can be made visible or available to users. Again, within the database environment, we have another package. So this call here to dbmsepg creates what we call a DAD. A DAD is a database access descriptor. Database access descriptor is just a logical name. It's a logical name for a virtual path. And I'm creating a virtual path, Scott, for reasons that will become apparent later on. So my DAD is called ScottDAD. It generates or defines a virtual path /Scott. So that's the virtual path that my end users will put into their browser when they get to the application. So instead of PLSOTN, they're going to put in Scott. Now I need to design my application. I shall connect to the Scott schema. Very simple application. Right. Take a look at, I'm not connected, am I? SQL+ Scott Tiger. Even connect Scott Tiger. A bit too much copy-paste going on. Right. And now design my application, which at this point is going to be a pretty simple application. Create or replace procedure, hello world, as begin. Next package, this is a standard package, not part of Apex, http.print. http.print, if you look at the HTTP package, HTTP, it has a whole set of procedures and functions. Procedure open table, procedure table header, procedure style, strike. Those of you who work with HTML a lot will recognize that what we're doing here is we're generating HTML tags. Now, if we were to use HTTP, for example, these are the tags to do with creating forms. I'm just using HTTP print. What am I going to print? Hello world, and then concatenate that to the timestamp. So that's a very, very simple procedure. Create or replace procedure, hello world, as begin, HTTP print, any old text string, end, and compile. Right, I can try to invoke it. So if I go to my browser, http:// moving on to security. At this point, I am not going to put in a password. You will see the effect of not giving it a user password. First off, 192.168.56.101. Port 8008, because remember 8008 was the listening port I defined for HTTP at this point. The virtual path /Scott. Why Scott? Because that's the virtual path I defined with the procedure call there. Now, before this is going to work, I need to associate logons through that with a particular schema. So one more call in the database, which will be Scott. One more call to the database will be... Now I'll try it straight away without using any security. Let's see if I can actually do it with no security at all at this point. So the procedure I wrote was called hello world. Well, hello_world. Right, no security. I get prompted for a logon. This is where I could have used the username password in the URL itself. I'm going to log on as user Scott, password Tiger. And there we go. The procedure is executed. The hello world procedure is executed and returned the string that I specified there. If I issue the URL again, and you can't see, if I click there, note the time, 6:21:25, 6:21:43, 6:21:45. So I'm executing that procedure each time. I'll make I don't have too much time, so I'll make my application slightly more complicated. What I'm trying to do at this point, as you can probably realize, is basically demystify what PL/SQL web applications are. But here's another example, another procedure. Create or replace procedure, print tab. And I'm giving this one an argument, tname, varchar2. As I need to set up a variable at this point, dummy, which is Boolean. That's because the procedure I'm going to use returns a Boolean, so I need somewhere to put it. And then begin. Right, dummy equals, I'll use the OAutil package at this point. OAutil. OAutil has a wonderful procedure called table print. And that will print it will generate all the HTML for printing a table with just one call. They'll pass into it tname, which is the variable, the argument being passed into my procedure. And I'm sure you can work out what this is going to do. It's going to print out whatever table the end user requests to be printed and see if it compiles. And it does. Okay, next stage of my application. I'll use my application, what did I call it? Print tab. So, print tab, passing through an argument, tname equals dept. Back comes the department table. Tname equals emp. Back comes the emp table. And the final example, what about DML? We can do DML through this as well. So one last procedure, and then we can move on to how the listening is working. Procedure called new sal. I'm going to change the salary of someone in my company. Create a replace procedure new sal as begin and give it a DML statement. Update. Update emp set sal equals salary where empno equals eno. And salary and eno are the arguments I'm defining for this procedure, both numeric. End. Try invoking that one now through the web. So the procedure is called new sal, and then my most complicated parameter string yet. Employee number equals, let's say I try to update Mr. Miller, 7934. 79, oops, get back up here. I've got it there already in the 7934. Ampersand is the delimiter on a parameter string, and here salary equals 8,000. That will do. So issuing that gives me nothing back, and that's because my very simple procedure here doesn't do any user interface work, but normally, of course, a message will come back. Go back to my table, and we should now see that Mr. Miller, his salary has gone up to 8,000, and has it indeed? Yes, it has. Right. And that is all there is to Apex applications. That's all an Apex application really is. All the application actually is. It's just a set of wizards for generating code such as that code I've just written. That's all it is. It's a set of wizards for generating PL/SQL packages, PL/SQL procedures, and it makes extensive use of packages like this for generating the HTML. It's nothing clever, except for how the web listener itself is configured.